Okay, Bernard Fanning and Paul Dempsey, welcome to Australian Musician.
Very much.
Hello there. Thanks for having us.
On August 2, you're delivering a new album called The Deluge under the name of Fanning Dempsey National Park, recorded in Sausalito, Norway. You went to Berlin to record a video. Was this all just an excuse to visit interesting places?
Yes, pretty much. I mean, we when we first talked about when we finally decided to make a record, we talked about it being fun and going to as many fun places as we could to eat, basically. That's kind of what it was based on. But it just worked out that way with the producer and the studio and all that sort of stuff that we ended up going to Sausalito.
Yeah, then we started making all this music, and we thought,
Yeah.
oh, we better do some recording while we're here as well.
Yeah.
In between meals.
Yeah. Before you started, you really wouldn't know how you would sound together. As you started recording and writing together, is it all just a sum of the parts, or were you consciously developing a Fanning Dempsey National Park sound as you got into it?
I think we were consciously developing it, but lots of stuff happened by accident.
Yeah, I mean,
You know?
up to a point, we were just throwing ideas to see if it was even, felt kind of fun enough and interesting enough to actually do something together. So it started off just like, yeah, what do you think of this? What do you think of this? And then when we did start to kind of go, yeah, this is good, let's do this, then it became a bit more like, okay, well, what is it? What kind of area, what kind of road do we want to go down? But there was still just a lot of just writing for writing's sake. And, some things didn't make it because they didn't quite fit the idea. So, it wasn't like everything was really specifically designed. It was just, we just wrote and wrote and wrote, and the things that fit. Yeah.
Yeah. So most of it happened in the studio? What kind of?
No. We were doing demos for a couple of years and sending them back and forth to each other. Paul was down here in Melbourne, locked down most of the time, so we couldn't actually get in a room together anyway. So we were just getting a kind of concept of a song, maybe a verse, chorus, and a little general structure of a song, and then each of us would send it off to the other one and go, okay, see what you can do with this.
And we were sort of like self-producing the demos to find what the sound was. And then obviously by the time we went into the studio with Craig Sylvie, who's a real producer, then he kind of had another level of, let's narrow the vision.
Yeah. Well, why did you go with Craig as a producer?
He's been on my kind of list of people I'd be interested in working with for a long time, just having made so many fantastic sounding records that I've loved, over the last couple of decades. So he's someone I've always been aware of. But more for he's I guess more known as a mix engineer. So he was kind of we talked about him mixing, and then we happened to be in London together, and he's based in London. So we went and met him and hung out with him and just talked about the whole project. And he produces and engineers as well. So then it was like, well, maybe you should just captain the whole thing.
Yeah.
And it was also, when we met him, there was just like a great rapport between us. We just liked him as a person. We already knew that he had all the credentials, in terms of the work he's done. But having that kind of connection personally helps so much when you're in the studio. It helps from lots of perspectives, but especially when you've got to solve a problem, knowing that the person is calm and that sort of thing, he's, we're a similar age and all that stuff. And all our references were very similar.
Yeah. There's some great vintage synth sounds on the album. Who were the synth rock or synth pop bands that you were both into back in the day?
I mean, like we both massive Bowie fans, but we talked about lots of stuff, ELO. I mean, not necessarily a synth band, but certainly used awesome sounding synths. ELO, Gary Newman,
Duran Duran.
yeah,
I was
Kraftwerk,
yeah.
but even like foreign, like
Yes.
so even like pretty much every band in the from the late 70s to the mid 80s was, even if they were a rock band, you know they were bringing synths into the arrangement just because it was such a new way to add texture to a song. And it was, I mean, I still remember I was a little kid at the time, but I just remember it all sounding really futuristic and really cool. And so, I mean, we've talked about, just the fact that like someone like Gary Newman or Bowie, Gary Newman in particular is someone who's always thought of as like this electronic music guy. But those records from the early 80s, it's a rock band. Bass, drums. It's just that the synth is kind of doing what the electric guitar was doing in most other bands, but it still kind of had a driving rock
rhythm section.
Yeah. And Bowie did that really well also, always great drummers, bass players, fantastic guitar players, and then just really, awesome, synth features here and there. But no one thinks of Bowie as being like a synth artist.
Yeah.
So it's just about how you fit it into an arrangement and how you make it complement a song, rather than, becoming the feature itself.
Yeah. So choosing 2200 Studios in Sausalito, did that have anything to do with the gear that they had there? Or did you take much gear? Did you bring much?
Not really. No, because we were the first ones in there. So it's reopening. It's the old record plant.
Yeah.
And it's been shut for 10 years.
Yeah.
And these two like Silicon Valley tech guys have decided to plow all of their excess Microsoft shares dividends into the project, and they want to revive it back to its old glory as a great analog studio with obviously digital capabilities and whatnot. So it wasn't even completely set up. We did it quite guerrilla style, and just happens that Michael Urbano, who is the guy that played drums on the record, is managing the studio. He's managing kind of the rebirth of it. And he went to the owners and said, look, I've got this project that I'm going to be on. Could we do it here? Could we kind of, have a premature birth of the studio? And they agreed. And so we went in there. So it was all,
we were
wasn't the
guinea pigs.
gear. Yeah, we were absolutely guinea pigs. Craig brought a few of his mics and a little bit of outboard, but it was very much like rehearsal room recording, but you just happen to have the rooms from the record plant where Rumours was made. So
but also luckily, the two guys, Jim and Chris, who bought the studio, also have really great collections themselves of instruments. So a lot of the instruments we used were theirs that they generously loaned to us. And then just, Michael Urbano, the drummer, just brought, 5 drum kits of his. Craig McFarland, who played bass, arrived with like 15 basses. Adam McDougall, who played some synths, just came in with literally a pickup truck of synths.
Full of vintage.
And we also need to thank Sequential, because they're based in San Francisco, and I have a Prophet 10 at home, which was getting a lot of use on the demos. So we were really lucky that they're based in San Francisco, and we got to go in there and meet the folks at Sequential, and they loaned us a Prophet for the project. And
so we kind of cobbled together the gear really more than anything, I guess. But the thing with the studio is that I think sometimes too much can be made of the location when it comes to what a record ends up being like or how successful it is. But there's something in the atmosphere of that place that is very conducive to wanting to work it's just beautiful. It's really well laid out. I mean, it's still the original setup, like parquetry, old school studio sort of style, parquetry floors and all that sort of stuff. And it's just got a really nice feeling about it, the way that it feels to work in there. And that's without, it being properly outfitted at the time. I'm sure by now it's probably done.
Yeah,
Getting close at
put,
least.
Yeah, they've put a bunch of stuff in there now, but it's also like where it's situated in Sausalito. Like, you're quite removed. You're not near downtown San Francisco.
Yeah.
Sausalito's a pretty sleepy little seaside
Yeah.
spot. So when you're there, you're there, and you're just there to work. And but yeah, it's an amazing atmosphere.
So was there a particular vintage synth that you gravitated to and you used a lot?
The Prophet certainly got a lot of use early on because it was kind of one of the first synths first kind of analog subtractive synths that I got my hands on. And then, but yeah, that quickly on the record, there's a lot of Prophet, there's a lot of Roland stuff. There was a Juno and a Jupiter and SH-101, Adam. They were, and then like the Korg MS-20,
Moog.
the Moog, Adam's Mini Moog, his Model D Mini Moog was like, he is a master of that thing. He knows that instrument inside out. And it's literally falling apart, and he has to keep putting it back together while he's playing. He's pushing the keyboard back into it because it keeps coming. He's had it forever. Yeah. And like I said, he drives it around in a pickup truck that he just puts it in the back. So, the Mini Moog, he was kind of his, like I said, he's just a master of that. But yeah, look, the Prophet, the Roland stuff. And then the other thing kind of later in the piece that we used a lot in the second session is this thing called the Deckard's Dream, which is made by Black Corporation. And it's essentially like a Yamaha CS80, but it's sort of in like a desktop synth, and it sounds incredible. And we used that a lot later on. Sort of I guess at the stage where we were like adding like over the W sort of textures and things, it was really beautiful for that.
Yeah. But the Prophet certainly, and the Juno for the beds, really for the kind of main body of the song sort of thing, I guess.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, a lot of the sequenced bass lines are all kind of the Roland, the classic Roland stuff.
In 2009, Powderfinger guest edited
That's right. Yeah.
Bernard, you did a whole article on the Omnichord. Did the Omnichord make it to the album?
Didn't make it, actually. No, it didn't.
I have one too.
Me too. But no, it didn't. It didn't on this, actually. I mean, that record Powderfinger record that we made at the time, we gratuitously put Omnichord on every song, even if it didn't fit. We just put it somewhere, so it was like every single song has an Omnichord on it. But no, it didn't. It wasn't really necessary this time because I think the stuff that we were using was very much more specific, like the Deckard's Dream things and like that. You can tune it in. So the Omnichord's an awesome resource, but it's got its limitations,
The other one that sort of was a surprise late in the piece that I ended up getting one as well because was the UDO Super 6. Which is basically, it's kind of like a Jupiter, like a Roland Jupiter 6. I guess it's really modeled on that, but it's got all these kind of crazy modern cross modulation features and stuff as well. But we use that a bit in Byron Bay as well, and I ended up sort of needing to have one.
Yeah. Did you surprise each other with your individual recording methods? Any studio quirks that either of you have and you thought, I never thought of that?
I'm certainly not Paul. He wouldn't have been surprised by me. Probably surprised by how shit it was.
Not true.
But I mean, the thing that I kind of took out of it recording wise with Paul is how good his hearing is, how much better it is than mine. Like, I mean, honestly, that's a massive piece of the pie when it comes to recording because there's stuff that simply can't hear because of standing in front of cymbals for the last 30 years, and not wearing earplugs or whatnot. But his attention to audio detail is really, really awesome. And what goes hand in hand with that is the design of tones then. So that whether that be with guitar pedals or whether it's on a synth or whatever it is, that I have always been much more driven by song than song production. And so that kind of then dominoes into the idea with Paul saying I write a lot of songs, where I don't feel like I do, but part of that is because I guess my time is a bit freed up because I just urgently want to move on to the next idea. And for me to be satisfied, I only have to be able to present a song that has a vocal and a guitar, or a vocal and a piano. And then I know that there's bigger fish to fry by doing it properly with proper musicians. Whereas Paul's capable of playing everything on a record and doing it to kind of release level. So pretty key difference there, I guess.
Yeah, well, I was surprised though a lot in the studio. I think we both get really specific about really different things. So I was often surprised about like that Bernard would really want to zone in on something that I just wouldn't occur to me to be that specific about it. And it would be like a harmony or just some element of a song that was about a feel or a groove. And I think sometimes I'm so technical, or I don't know, like too brain about things that
I think the word that we generally use is anal. The rest of us.
Well, yeah, but I think I like there were times where like Bernard would really want to like zone in on something, and I'd be like, I wouldn't have realized how important it was, but then when we went through the process, then I'd be like, that was like that's really made a big difference. And yeah, so I certainly learned a lot about, I think we are different in but I think that really we complemented each other in that way, because we both can get pretty specific about
different things. And that's the key, isn't it, to collaboration, is like actually enhancing each other's weaknesses and allowing the strengths to happen naturally, but then being able to fill in the gaps, like any team, I guess, where that's how you want it to work. You want it to kind of intertwine.
Yeah.
Yeah. Dunning,
yes.
Dunning-Kruger National Park is a track on the album. Fanning Dempsey National Park is the name of the band. Dunning-Kruger effect is a cognitive bias in which people believe they are smarter or more capable than they actually are. Tell me about the relationship between that song and the band name.
The song was written. We had that song before we had a name for the project.
Yeah.
And I think we just, we didn't want the project to just be called, Bernard Fanning and Paul Dempsey. We liked the idea of it having a sort of almost like a band name. But it also just sort of seemed stupid not to put our names in it somehow. So, we threw around, Fanning Dempsey Electrical Company, Fanning Dempsey pool cleaning or whatever, but the national park was just kind of sitting there in front of us, I guess.
And it was, none of the others were heroic or pompous enough to fit the bill. So we wanted to get something as stupid as possible. I mean, obviously Dunning-Kruger National Park is a play on Kruger National Park. It kind of sums it up, really, that we were trying to joke. We were joking the whole way along with each other, and even with dumb stuff like song titles or whatever. So because the songs, I mean, the Dunning-Kruger effect is no laughing matter. It's actually shaping the way the world is nosediving into its own asshole right at the moment. So if I could be so eloquent.
Yeah.
But
We've had a string of prime ministers who clearly suffer from it.
yeah, yeah.
But
And along with, you know, thankfully 49% of the population, especially during the pandemic.
Yeah.
The working title pretty much all along of the project was Defenders of the Realm. And yeah, we just didn't know how to get our names into that.
Yeah, it just wasn't metal enough.
Maybe that can be a side project to this
Yeah,
side.
Yeah, when the metal album comes.
yes.
Is there a song on the album you're both particularly proud of?
I'm proud of the whole record. Yeah, I couldn't single one out.
Not one in particular, but it's always the way when you make records where you've got favorites and then that lasts for a few weeks and then another batch kind of arises and become favorites. You know, for me, it's like the key thing I think is that there's no weaknesses there. There's nothing in there. We were lucky that we had, I mean, not lucky, we worked hard on the writing and we had spare songs, obviously. More than 10 songs that we'd written. And so we were able to just make it, you know, equally as strong across the whole record, despite the fact that there's different textures and different song stylings in there.
Yeah. I believe you started rehearsing the live show
Yesterday.
Is it a difficult album to reproduce live?
No, it's taken a lot more, you know, it's a lot more than just plugging in your guitar and rocking out. You know, there's been several weeks of you know, trying to recreate the sort of sound design and the synths that you hear on the record, because we're not taking, you know, a dozen vintage synths on tour. So, you know, the live show is, you know, a lot of it's going to come out of 2 Roland Juno X synths and a couple of Arturia synths. So it's a matter of making all of what's on the record, trying to recreate that out of a minimum of equipment, so that, like I said, you don't have to take a dozen vintage synths on the road. So yeah, there's just been a lot of prep work of getting all those sounds programmed in and ready to go, but we did all that. So when we got in the rehearsal room over the weekend, it was just all there. And we've got an amazing band, and it felt really good straight away. We've had 2 rehearsals and it's already feeling really, really good. So it's going to be really fun live, because it's still going to be live. You know, it's we keep, like, you know, we're talking a lot about how much synth is on the record and all that stuff, but it's still going to be, you know, it's driven by, you know, a great drummer, bass player, you know, guitars and vocals. And so it's going to have, the energy's really good, just with really great different textures.
So how many piece band?
6.
Okay.
2 of us, 2 keyboard players, keys and guitar, and drums and bass.
Yeah.
So because we also, like, with that rehearsal, we're just at the very infant stages of it, and you've obviously heard the record, and there is an audio aesthetic to the record that is, it kind of, each song kind of stays in its lane, if you know what I mean. Whereas live, I think that there'll be elements of that, but it will have more breath and more kind of rise and fall, because it naturally does when you've got a rock band playing. You know, yeah. I think there's been, and we have contributed a lot to this, the idea that there's synthesizers kind of driving everything. It very much is a different sound for both of us in that regard, but they're still rock songs.
Yeah.
You know, they're just kind of populated by different stuff.
Yeah. On the whole, the album is quite an up-tempo album. Was that a conscious thing right from the start?
Again, I think it's just the 10 that happened to get selected, you know, because we did write a lot more. So yeah, it wasn't conscious like let's make an upbeat record. We didn't. I mean, we wanted it. The whole time we've been wanting to have fun.
Yeah.
And we've been always referencing stuff that we loved from the 80s. So I guess the idea of wanting it to have a certain energy was always there. But yeah,
for me it was. I think I was conscious. I mean, I can fart out a really sad ballad in the morning generally, but I was consciously writing stuff that was more energetic and up feeling because I wanted that to be the thing. And I mean, I think it lends itself to that idea. We'd started playing with sequence bass lines and all that sort of stuff, and it's just fun. It's just got so much energy to it, and the kind of the not inhumanity, the non-humanity of it makes you kind of want to be doing stuff that's really energetic. You know what I mean? Like there's something about it.
When something's just going da, 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 da,
yeah,
it's hard to not.
It's the insistent kind of nature of it. Yeah, it makes you want to keep that energy up, and so yeah, there was no conscious effort though. Overall, I mean, we're kind of being exposed every time we do an interview. The interviewers have thought about it a lot fucking more than we have. So it's just kind of came together. It was one of those things where things just. I mean, we certainly narrowed the goalposts in terms of what type of production we were looking at and all those sorts of things, but we never had any grand architecture.
Yeah, it wasn't like, oh, now we need to write a song that's like this.
We need a power ballad for the third single.
Got one.
I guess,
it has a sequence bass line.
I guess because the album's not out yet and you've already started rehearsing, there's a sense of freedom as to what you can do to the songs.
Of course, we can do whatever we want.
Yeah, no real allegiance to the recorded version.
Yeah, no, I mean, it's like Bernard said before. I mean, just by virtue of being on stage in front of an audience, the dynamic is going to change from the record. It's gonna have a lot more, up and down and push and pull and it should. So I guess that's the reason as well that there's lots of synth on the record, but we're not going to go on stage and try and perfectly reproduce it with backing tracks and. That's no fun. That would bore both of us. Like being on stage for an hour with backing tracks. I can't think of anything more boring. So
yeah,
so we've designed the show and put it together in such a way that everything is played. And it's people on stage playing instruments, not playing along with things.
Which is how it was recorded as well. But I mean, all of the beds were a 4-piece band.
Yeah.
Hammering away,
live takes,
4 or 5. Yeah.
There were no click tracks or anything on the record. Like at the most, Adam might have been playing a sequence, and
the drummer was playing
lock in with that. Yeah. Just like Gary Newman did or whatever. The guy in his band was playing a MS-20 that was going but, and they all just grooved to that.
Yeah. Well, guys, the album's out on August 2. It's called The Deluge. It is an up-tempo, fun album, and I look forward to seeing what you do with it live. And thanks for chatting with us.
Thank you.
No worries. Thanks for having us, mate. Cheers.